What if I told you that some of the most profound lessons about healing trauma, building authentic relationships, and experiencing God's presence can be learned from mucking out horse stalls? Or that a grumpy, jaded donkey could teach us the transformational power of community? Or that a horse standing quietly in a pasture could mirror back to us the parts of ourselves that we've been hiding? Today's conversation takes us to a small horse farm where the daily rhythms of caring for animals has become a sacred space for discovering truths about the human soul. We're going to talk about why pain from the past never stays in the past until it receives healing, how we were designed for connection, just like donkeys need their herd, and what it means to simply be instead of constantly doing to earn approval. And today I'm here with Sharon Devries. Sharon, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, well, tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey into therapy, and what drew you specifically to equine assisted therapy.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. I became a therapist about 4 years ago. So as you can tell by my age, this is a second career for me, but a lifelong calling. I always had a heart for understanding what's going on beneath the surface, and a desire to listen to people and do something to support them and help them in their pain. And so, I went back to school at age 50. So that's my recent journey into being a clinical mental health counselor. I am a very privileged team member at the Center for Family Transformation. And right around the time I was in grad school, we purchased a little farm, a farmette, 9 acres. We're able to stay within our hometown. And it was definitely a God opportunity. It was nothing that we were truly seeking out at that time, although it fulfilled a lifelong dream to have horses. Because I fell in love with them when I was 10 years old, when I had a horse. And so once we were getting settled into the farm and I was at the point of graduating and getting licensed and, started practicing, it just became this, how could I miss this opportunity that God has given to take this, these creatures that he's created for healing and using it, combining that with the training that I was able to receive, in the degree that I was able to obtain, and bring that together in a beautiful symphony.
Yes, and I have seen you do it. It's been wonderful. It's fun to interview you, Sharon, because we've been friends for very many years.
Yeah.
I've known you, I think, for almost 20 years. That's it. We served in youth ministry together and have had connection for many years in our church world. And now we're serving together as mental health counselors, and it's been wonderful. And so to see you be able to come into one of your passions in terms of helping people, but also doing so on the farm with the animals, it seems like it's been something that you've been so passionate, willing to do a lot of hard work for, right?
Yeah.
And it's really been a benefit to those clients who are experiencing the equine assisted therapy.
Yes. Yeah. It's been a fun journey. For sure.
So fun. Yes. And so part of our process at the Center for Family Transformation here in North Carolina is that each of us as therapists contribute a blog series a couple times a year. And one of the blog series you wrote this last year, Sharon, is called Musings from the Farm. And this first piece in your blog series starts with something most people wouldn't actually associate with therapy, and that's mucking out horse stalls. So walk us through that metaphor. What made you connect cleaning stalls with the work of healing?
Right. So one thing that I've learned to appreciate so much about the farm is lack of distractions. Don't really get a great internet connection. So when I'm there, it is like entering a different world, and there's just time to contemplate and ponder and muse. And so mucking out stalls is just one of those inevitable things that you do when you have horses. And so as I was spending time mucking out the stalls and pondering, as like my mind is always thinking about something, I began thinking about the monotony of mucking out the stalls, but the how essential it is. And my mind just started wondering to, what is this like symbolic of? And I began thinking about the importance of, when we muck out a stall, we don't want to really leave manure behind. It's really important to get it all. And so, yeah, I kind of started seeing this whole analogy between those unhealed places in our lives, the trauma, negative childhood experiences, dysfunction, woundedness, that become kind of like that manure. And when we leave it in the stalls, it stinks, it builds up, it's not healthy, and it attracts a gajillion flies. And so, yeah, so I kind of started thinking through all the parts that seem to fit with that analogy.
It's kind of like a sermon illustration, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Always think,
terrible.
what are yeah, these life situations that are like normal for
Yeah.
me and or for you, being a part of a farm, and
Hmm.
how to apply that to my work as a therapist. And so
Hmm.
we saw that analogy being so true, that we can't, just like we can't leave manure in a stall, we can't
Hmm.
leave unhealed trauma
Hmm.
in our lives,
Hmm.
right? And so you chose to write about it. And you also wrote something else that really struck me. It is that humans have a natural tendency to leave
Hmm.
the past buried, avoid, minimize suffering, or
Hmm.
normalize.
Hmm.
That's what you speak about in the blog.
Yeah.
You even mentioned that sometimes people are simply unaware of what lies beneath due to
Hmm.
dissociation.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
can you talk a little bit about that? Talk about those flies, quote unquote,
Hmm.
what they look like in real life, the
Yeah.
symptoms that tell us something's actually buried
Yeah.
beneath the surface and needs attention.
Right. Right. Yeah. As you mentioned, the avoidance, it's a natural coping mechanism. And unfortunately, it brings us temporary relief, but not full not full relief and healing. We really don't heal from it unless we feel it. And so I kind of likened it to, it's tempting when we're mucking out a stall to get the big stuff
Mm-hmm.
and then just put fresh shavings over the little stuff, and kind of just move on. Well, I took care of that big thing, I'm over it, I'm fine. We'll just move on, and then the flies give it away every time, because even if it's buried manure, they will find it. And so, I liken those flies to things that really are intended to bring our system and our attention to the fact that think there's some unhealed, unresolved places, some maturity gaps. And
Right.
so it might look like anxiety, depression, interpersonal relationship issues, addictions. We think of beeps, life model, and the things that we might turn to, the behaviors and experiences and events and people, is temporary relief. And so, yeah, those are just some of the many flies that might be
Some of the
buzzing around.
flies that might be there, and you also mentioned these like three essential steps that
Hmm.
that we face when we're facing a challenging stall to clean.
Hmm.
That you have to have the right tools, you have to put
Yeah.
on the patience and ask for help.
Yeah.
And so, just piggybacking on that answer you just gave, what
Mm.
also as some essential tools that people need
Mhm.
on their healing journey, just like you need tools for cleaning out a challenging stall.
We really do need to be able to have self reflection and just awareness about how our past experiences have impacted us in the now. We need healthy relationships and multi generational community to support us. Another essential tool, healthy boundaries. We need to make sure that we're practicing self care as we're on this journey to muck out the stall. And then some Emmanuel lifestyle stuff, right? That we are in prayer that we're journaling, that we're incorporating a presence with Emmanuel daily, in our mindfulness and meditation. And then we need to have some good, healthy coping strategies, some
Mhm.
good shalom for the body exercises, being able to calm and quiet ourselves. And then we need resolve. Definitely, when we take on a stall, it can feel overwhelming at the beginning when we go
Mhm.
in and it hasn't been cleaned in a couple days. And so we need the resolve that on the other side it's going to be worth it.
That's so good. That's so good, Sharon. It, I'm just thinking about how you and I both, in our specialties, are treating survivors of complex trauma and how
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
funky those stalls can be, right? How complicated, how I think the word that we used earlier is challenging, how
Mm-hmm.
that complexity of trauma can be. And so
Yeah.
utilizing a lot of different tools in order to manage the complexity of the trauma, it speaks to honoring the system of the person,
Mm-hmm.
honoring the level of pain they've been in terms of what
Yeah.
they've gone through. And so I appreciate that about you, and appreciated that about, how you treat with clients, and also about
Mm-hmm.
this in this blog series. I think it's really helpful.
Hmm.
Moving on, just at the second blog in the series is about the donkey Poppy, Princess Buttercup, right? And the community and connection analogy that we're making here. So moving from stalls to the pastures, so to speak, you've shared this incredible transformation story about Princess Buttercup and Poppy. So tell us about Princess Buttercup. What was he like when he first arrived?
Wow. Such a curmudgeon. He did not want anything to do with humans or the herd. He just wanted to do his job in solitude, and he would not let us get near him. And he's this adorable thing. He's a standard donkey and gray and fuzzy, and we wanted so badly to love him,
Yeah.
and he had so much distrust he would not let us get close. And so we actually had a donkey challenge. After we first got him, we needed to get a haltron, and so all of our big kids came home, and we said $20 to whoever can catch Buttercup, and it took the whole family. So he was very antisocial.
Oh, little one. Is very antisocial. And so, but then came Poppy, right? What
Yeah.
happened when this 6-month-old bundle of energy arrived?
Yeah. Well, at first, Buttercup was really not so sure what to think about Poppy and didn't know if he was going to be a threat to the herd or not. So we had to work through that. Equine do have to establish their pecking order, but they are very relational, and donkeys need donkeys. So once we worked through making sure that Buttercup was not going to kill Poppy,
Right.
and we could let them be together. Poppy, in all of his playfulness, we have toys in the pasture for the donkeys, and he would grab a rope and bring it to Buttercup, and he would get close to him and
Mhm.
lean right up against him, and we saw Buttercup literally transform. We didn't know that he could be playful. We didn't know that he could be social, and so they play together for hours a day, but it translated over into um, Buttercup overall becoming more trusting with humans, um, and so it just Poppy has brought out Buttercup's true identity, his relational self. He was completely non-relational before that, and now they're inseparable.
I love it how you connected that concept of the two of them who are probably outside your house right now playing in the pasture with one another, to the research about loneliness and mortality rates in humans. That's
Mhm.
wonderful.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
what is it that you feel like your donkey has really specifically taught you about the need for community?
Mm. That we need people to know
Mhm.
who we need people to help us know who we are.
Yes.
Like that's how it is for humans. And so what I saw with the donkeys is that bringing another donkey into the herd and them having each other, you know, especially for Buttercup, he needed Poppy to show him who he really was, and the potential of what he could be too. You know, I kind of see it like as a healing journey for Buttercup. Once Poppy came on the scene, Poppy helped him heal. And so, you know, the life model says that people need to know who they are, and then they need to be reminded of that by people who love them. And so that's what the donkeys modeled for me, is seeing Buttercup being reminded of who he really is by how Poppy loved him.
You're speaking my language. It's so true. This idea that this analogy and this experience you're having with these precious animals beautifully segues into what we know about the brain. And you talk about in the writing this neuroplasticity of the brain, and I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about how our brains are actually designed for relational joy, and how that relates to Princess Buttercup and what she went through and how she became herself when Poppy
Yeah.
came on the scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's Chris Kersey, I think, Corsi, that said, we're most like ourselves when joy is in control. And that we find that in multi-generational community, in relationship with God, in a place of belonging, others that are happy to be with us. I mean, that is living out of our relational brain, and our joy center. When we're operating out of the joy center of our brain, when that is being nurtured and activated, that's our relational brain. That's our true self.
Yeah, so it's like Princess Buttercup wasn't even fully alive before Poppy came
Right.
on the scene, and it like
Mm-hmm.
she maybe even didn't know what it was like for her to live from her relational self.
Right.
She maybe thought
Right.
that's who she was. You know,
Right.
this shy and
Right.
quiet and isolated. But then when relational joy comes on the scene, something really beautiful happens. And I know you quoted something that I want to mention before we move to this third blog, and that is that people need to know who they are, and they need to be reminded of that by people who love them. And that's from the life model framework. And as you mentioned, and so we see that playing out with the donkeys. And last but not least, we've got this blog article that you wrote on horses, presence, authenticity. And so let's talk a little bit about this last one. You did have a horse as a child named Wendy, not Wendy, and you loved her, and then waited 40 years before the dream of another horse was fulfilled. So,
Yeah.
what was it about that childhood experience that stayed with you all those years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I often say I didn't know God then, but God used a horse. He used his creation to teach me about himself. And I do believe God created horses to be healers. So it taught me, as a girl going through tough times. I was 10 and struggling with interpersonal relationships and being picked on and bullied and not having confidence, and being with this large animal that was so accepting of me, that held space with me, and being on her and riding her, it just started growing my confidence, um, and that I wasn't too much. Her ability to just hold space and non-judgmentally love and accept me, for who I was. And I also remember just being so calm.
Yes.
When I was with her, my mom would drop me off at the barn right from school, and it didn't matter what sort of a day I had at school. Um, I was able to become calm in her presence and just feel more grounded just in myself, my true self.
So that stuck with you all these years, that you felt more fully alive yourself, more fully
Yeah.
connected to your grounded nature of who you are with
Yes.
your horse. And so now you've got a horse farm, and you're practicing equine assisted therapy, and the horses have continued to teach you so much. So walk me
Mhm.
through what the horses have taught you about presence, emotional
Yeah.
honesty, and self-regulation, which you mentioned
Yeah.
in the article.
Yeah. Right. Well, horses live entirely in the moment. They don't hold on to yesterday, and they're not concerned about the future. So they really teach us to live in the moment. And if you've ever been around horses, you know the saying, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Like, you are not going to rush a horse. And so being with them reminds us to slow down, to breathe, to inhabit the presence. Um, as far as emotional honesty, horses mirror what we feel, not what we say. Horses would just rather have you be forthright and honest with them. If you're scared, they would rather you just acknowledge that and be honest. So they really invite genuine self awareness.
Mhm.
And then, they regulate our nervous system. They have an energy field of about 15 feet. Their heart rate is lower than ours. And research shows that just, being within their energy field, after several minutes, our heart rate starts to sink with them. And so they show us the value of self-regulation, calming and quieting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an amazing experience that clients can have
Mm-hmm.
in equine assisted therapy. It's kind of taken the therapeutic world by storm in the last decade, it seems.
Yeah.
That this has become a popular mode of therapy because horses can attune to and discern
Mm-hmm.
things that as humans we don't. So there's this wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
comfort that comes. And in this article, just before we finalize this recording, you talk about a client who came to the pasture for an equine session, and she was confident and excited, but when she tried to connect to the horses, they backed away. So can you speak
Yes.
to that story and how what that
Yeah.
did for the client and what it revealed
Mhm.
for herself?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, this, just kind of as context, one of the things that I've been working on with this client, or we had been working on together in the office, was, just performance, just kind of having a big performance part and a big people pleasing part. And kind of fear of being negatively judged. And so, but she stepped onto the farm, and she was excited, and said she was excited to meet some new friends. So she kind of had already set up in her mind some intentions for how she would connect with the horses and how they might greet her. And so I always kind of let my client just lead out a little bit ahead, because I don't want the horses coming up to me. I want them to have their own unique experience with the horses. And so as I kind of lagged behind, they started approaching her, and she extended her hand toward them, and then they backed down. They backed away, and and got back to grazing, put their heads down, and something stirred within her, and she became emotional. And she told me, she's like, I don't know how to connect with them. I need to know how to connect with them. What can I do to get their attention? Basically, what can I do, to gain their affection? And so I just gently suggested that, perhaps the horses weren't asking her to do anything at all. Perhaps they simply just wanted her to be. And that really struck a chord with her. And so in that moment, she lowered her head and began to cry. Uh, and I intentionally kind of held back, but while I was holding space with her, I stayed back, and I noticed the horses and the donkeys actually um, kind of surrounding her. They formed almost a triangle around her. And because her head was down, she didn't notice. And so I softly asked her just to open her eyes and notice. that they were showing her acceptance. And then she was able to, when I asked her, articulate, I asked her, what are they showing you acceptance for? And she recognized she wasn't doing anything at all to gain their acceptance. And so it must be that they were just accepting her for who she is, which was just this beautiful, profound moment, realizing that some of that pain that she had carried since childhood, that just being wasn't enough. And now that was what the horses were teaching her.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's profound, really.
Yeah.
And what comes up for me as you say that is just there's this beautiful Enneagram song on that plays on YouTube. I can't even remember the name, but I listened to the one for the type one. That's how I identify at this season of my life. And that one of the lines says, I spend my whole life searching to find that grace requires nothing of me. Isn't that powerful? And so
That's
in that
beautiful.
moment, the client who you write about in your article found that truth, right? That presence and acceptance is there for her, even
Yeah.
just by virtue of
Yeah.
her being alive.
Yeah.
And that's what life model accentuates as well. And I want to ask, I know we just have a few more minutes left, but I just want to ask you a couple of questions based on how all of this connects to life model. You yourself are a student of life model and you incorporate therapy. You are a life model informed therapist, as you've been a part of the trainings and the modules that we've created at the Institute.
Yeah.
In the blog, you mentioned the idea of a manual lifestyle
Mhm.
as informed by Dr. Carl Lehman. This idea of
Yeah.
living with an ever-present awareness of God's nearness. How
Right.
do you see horses helping us experience that as humans?
Yeah. Uh, I believe as part of God's creation, right? It's seeing and experiencing his his presence within his creation. Um, so for me, that's been so powerfully horses, right? But I mean, for some people, it's the sunset, it's the sunrise, it's the ocean, it is the mountains, but it's seeing and seeking the connection with God and the awareness of Him just in daily rhythms, in life through creation. And for me,
Mm.
that's been horses that remind me to be still and present. And I feel, I just feel those characteristics of God
So grounded.
through my horses.
Yes,
Um,
I can
yeah,
identify with that. I know you've invited our team just to come out and just be on the
yeah.
farm, just sit in the stillness. And there's something about the presence of the animals and their
Mhm.
non-hurried, non-anxious presence that grounds
Yeah.
us. And throughout the series, you really touched on so many life model concepts: the need for community, joy based relationships, healing through connection, the importance of
Mhm.
presence. If you could distill the biggest lesson, I know that's a big question, but the biggest lesson the farm has taught you
Mhm.
about what humans need to thrive, what do you think that would be as a final note here today?
Wow. Yeah, it's hard to summarize the biggest lesson. Um, yeah, it's really, I think it goes back to what we were just speaking to, as my mind is going through all the lessons on community and how we're made for community and we're made for belonging. And those are so important. But I think for me, it's the Emmanuel lifestyle concept. It's experiencing God and His presence interactively in everything that I do, and the farm is just a beautiful greenhouse
Mhm.
for that. Just being in creation, being able to be still
Mhm.
and connect with the presence of God through His
Yeah.
creation.
Which speaks to the module we just put out, the attachment to God
Mhm. Mhm.
6 session standard protocol. our second standard protocol. And you end this whole series of your writing with that question: where do you most clearly sense God's nearness? Right. And so what I hear you saying today throughout your sharing, and I appreciate so much that you're here with us today, Sharon, but that it's really on the farm, in nature, connected to God's creation, in terms of being around animals who aren't trying to, get ahead and perform and get acceptance. They just are. That we can feel the nearness of God, and we can feel that attachment to God. So Sharon, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today. I really appreciate you being here with me.
Oh, well, thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks for letting me share some of my heart and my experiences. And I loved that.
Oh, I'm so glad. And your depth of understanding and what you contribute, it's priceless. And so for those who are listening in and maybe thinking, maybe it's time I need to do some mucking of the stalls of my own life. Yes. If that's you, find a good therapist. But even more than that, we wish for you to find joy with God and with others. Because here at CFT, we know that healing